Hi, I'm Rebecca Balcarcel, and I'm excited to talk about an essay today by Ralph Waldo Emerson. It's called The Transcendentalist. Now, Emerson gives this first as a lecture, a talk, in Boston in the 1840s, and then he writes it down and it's published in a little journal called The Dial, which was famous for publishing Transcendentalist writing. Now, this piece is rather complicated and long, so it's going to take me several videos to unpack it all. So we'll just call this part one. Emerson wants to accomplish three things with this essay. First, he wants to define transcendentalism. What is it? What kind of philosophy is this? What are its tenets and how does it view the world? Secondly, he wants to describe some actual transcendentalists and what they do. He'll look at their behavior and try to explain their behavior and their choices in the context of this philosophy. Thirdly, he wants to explain to society what these transcendentalists are doing. Here are these choices they make, this is the kind of life they lead, why? He wants the rest of society, the wider world, to understand what they're doing. Let's take a look at the first paragraph. The first thing Emerson says is that this brand new movement is actually not new. He finds the philosophy of transcendentalism appearing throughout history, throughout all of humankind's existence. It's just that right now, in 1842, it is called Transcendentalism. So he sees this philosophy as an eternal one that just now is being called this particular name at this particular time. He says these are not new ideas, but the very oldest of thoughts cast into the mold of these new times. Emerson goes on to compare this new transcendentalism to an old philosophical stance, idealism. And to explain what idealism is, he compares it to materialism. He describes materialists as depending on their senses and trusting their senses to tell them what reality actually is. Materialists think of human beings as subject to facts, to history, to circumstances, that humans are somewhat pushed around by these other forces. Idealism, on the other hand, is more concerned with consciousness and man's thought, will, ability to create his own circumstances. And rather than relying on the data that senses deliver to the brain, the idealist tries to look into the essence of things, which is beyond what the senses can perceive. And that sense of beyond starts to sound like that word transcend, transcendentalism. So Emerson would say that idealism contains materialism. That is, idealism affirms all the same facts that materialists notice, observe, and record, but the idealist sees those facts within a larger context that involves some kind of force, almost like Yoda's The Force from Star Wars, that actually creates everything and stands behind all material reality. Idealists approve of facts, but they use facts as a language to talk about what's behind the facts, some kind of universal truth that exists beyond and behind everything. And they say in order to understand that universal truth or to learn what it is, one has to retire from the senses. And if you can retire from the senses, then you will be able to perceive, maybe with your intuition or through inspiration, the true reality, kind of a reality with a capital R. Okay, we've made it through the first paragraph. Let's go on to paragraph 2. The idealist, says Emerson, in speaking of events, sees them as spirits. Now, how can you see an event as a spirit? Well, he says the materialist looks at a table and just sees hard surfaces, corners, wood, whereas the idealist and the transcendentalist sees this material object as the consequence, the conclusion of some spiritual fact, as if an idea has been set into motion in some other realm, maybe an idea world, almost like Plato's ideas and forms. That idea is set into motion and it materializes in the form of this table. Emerson says that being an idealist is like being able to see the reverse side of a tapestry. So while most people just look at the front and see the nice, pretty image on the front, the Transcendentalist looks at the back and sees all the threads and how it all fits together and how it all actually has come into being. The Transcendentalist is looking for the source of things, the cause and ultimate cause, one might say, of things, rather than the things themselves. Thankfully, that pretty much covers paragraph 2.